again. I'm glad that you're making this services too. I love to hear when they sing and get into the mood. Yeah, because this is your service. You may come to hear some new thoughts or maybe some things put in perspective, but this is your place, and I'm glad you're making it yours. Today, I got to lead up to this. I'm cleaning out stuff at home. I'm in my 80s now, and I have stuff probably from at least 60 years back somewhere in one of the boxes, and pictures, and having gone through 3 degrees, I have stacks of boxes of spiritual stuff, notes from every class I've taken, that sort of thing, and I'm cleaning them out. Well, I ran across a set of tapes from one of my minister instructors at Unity Village, and we loved him because he was a character. He always had a different approach to things, and he especially liked difficult things in the Bible to translate metaphysically, or try to get us to translate metaphysically to his liking. And we loved him for it because he challenged us. He loved it when we'd argue with him. But his way was his way, and that's the way we should go, he thought. But he challenged us and loved every one of us. His name was Ed Rabel. And I'm going to give one of the cryptic parables, and I'll describe what that means. That's in the Sermon on the Mount, which is Matthew 5, 6, and 7. That's when Jesus takes the people up into the mountains and talks to them, gives them all kinds of helpful hints on how to get through this life, and especially in their time. So the mountains in metaphysics is you go to a higher place in consciousness. It's not the deep valley, it's the mountain. They weren't necessarily mountaintop, but they took them away from the crowds so all the people could be together, so they could hear one another. And there's nice God-made amphitheaters in mountains. And so that's where he took these people. And that's where Sermon on the Mount came from, the teachings he gave them in Matthew. And we know in the beginning that it starts with the Beatitudes, and maybe you read on and you read about the light, that you're the light. You don't hide under a bushel basket, or the city built on the hill that you can see the light. Those are all fun and games ones. But you get down into some of the teachings that he goes on to talk about, and they can get pretty tough that you don't really even want to read them. But we're going to take one on today. We're up for it. You guys can do this. We did. We had to. Okay. This is in the first chapter, or in Matthew 5, 21 through 26. And you will remember it in some form or another, depending on which translation of the Bible you use. You have heard that it was said in ancient times, "You shall not murder, and whosoever murders shall be liable to judgment." But this is Jesus talking about it. "But I say to you, if you are angry with your brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult your brother and sister, you will be liable to counsel. And if you say, 'You fool,' you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother and sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court with him. Or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. Agree with thine adversary quickly." That gets hard. A cryptic parable is not one of the feel-good ones. It's one that doesn't make any sense to me. I'm just going to skip over it type, right? I don't understand that, so we're just going to go on. Well, after today, you don't have any excuse. You can deal with it as you want out of knowledge. It's defined, cryptic parable is defined, a short narrative with moral or religious point that has a hidden, mysterious, baffling, obscure, and curt meaning. So, does that sound like this one? Yeah. Not everything in the gospel is to please us. But Rabel says, he calls it, it's here to save us from useless, unnecessary spiritual suffering. That's how he gets around that. So if anybody tries to save you, and you say, you know what that means. It's to save you from useless, unnecessary spiritual suffering. Okay. And then he said, not only are we to agree with our adversary quickly, but later on, and not too far on down that chapter, in the next chapter, he says, turn the other cheek. That's another cryptic parable. So they're in there. Try not to skip over them, and pray as you work with them, because they have lessons for us. It's to keep us out of unnecessary spiritual suffering. So why agree with the adversary quickly? Why is he saying that? That's the last thing we want to do. What happens to us? We build it up. Somebody, it could be, I'll probably get it right. All teachings of Jesus have to do with spiritual principle, even these harder ones, especially these, because these are the ones that we have the most difficulty with in life, I think, that come up against our will. What we're willing, and it's not working, and we get mad. Somebody stands in our way, or a situation stands in our way. Those are our adversaries. It can be a situation. It could be a spouse. It could be somebody in the family. It could be somebody at work. Somebody here at church could stand in our way. So why do we want to agree with them quickly? Because it will help us not get into useless, unnecessary suffering. Jesus taught spiritual principle. He did not talk sociology, politics, economics, or anything connected to human opinion. He is all about teaching us spiritual principles and the laws of spiritual universe of which we're a part. It's in us. That's why I did this meditation. We are all one in the spiritual universe. So how we put out, we're going to get back in some form. So what is it you want to put out? Jesus said that agree with thine adversary as soon as possible, or undesirable things will happen. Now, we could take it with Jesus trying to tell me what to do, because we're used to putting personalities in, in what we're when people oppose us. Ed Rabel says, when this happens to him, he gets unagreeable. And he didn't use the word anger. He just said unagreeable. When things get in his face or feel like there are obstacles in his life. So some of these things, when you hear unagreeable, that came from Ed Rabel. Jesus says we must believe or agree that whatever happens in our lives, God means it for good. Can you look at a person in your adversary and remember before you get into that mindset, they're mean, they're bad, they're out to get me, because there are things that happen once we let that negative emotion go forward, that anger, that disagreeableness, or whatever you're feeling. It could be hurt, which is a hurt. Now, this does not mean that we are to agree with someone that's going to do harm, or that's against spiritual principle anyway, or anything that's that negative. This is a personal conflict you're having. It does not have to do with harm or destruction, although your mind may go to that place. But we got to stop it when we take it as an opinion of the other person. Am I making any sense to you? We must stop it right there and remember, God means it for good. Nothing can happen to us that God doesn't mean it for good. So next time somebody gets in your face, the first thing you think about, try to train yourself, rather than say, once you know that you're starting to feel disagreeable, some way, God means this for good. Now, the more we become disagreeable in our mind, we throw ourselves out of the spiritual law of rhythm and harmony in the universe. Can you see that? Don't you close up? And you're not as sensitive to the good stuff because you're all tied up in your emotion. And just because you feel it doesn't mean it's the right thing. You don't have to go with it because you put it out there, you can bring it back, or you can replace it. And we'll get into how to do those things. So there's a peaceful rhythm and harmony in the universe most of the time. We cause the conditions in us, but we can change them too. We can change them. This sounds, he says, we cause conditions in us of useless, unnecessary spiritual suffering for ourselves. In other words, our own disagreeableness towards our adversary has become our own cause of our continuing suffering. Ugh. But it's true, because God is good, and God wants good for us. We cause it to ourselves. Now, this sounds hard, but it's not hardness. It is divine law. Why does this happen? The universe is not one thing and our lives are another. We are within the universe and the universe is in us. We are not separate, like the wave is not separate from the ocean. Our lives and the universe are one thing. Intimately connected in all ways and all points, including the universal law of rhythm and harmony. So it has to it shuts that down too when we are disagreeable or angry. No wonder we feel out of sorts. That's not our home. We're not made to feel these things. It should get our attention because we can change it. We have the power. When we are in tune with ourselves, our soul is in tune with the universe. And when we are out of tune within ourselves, we're out of tune with the universal law, and useless, unnecessary unnecessary suffering will happen until we get back in tune. Okay, so it's up to you. It's up to you. Ed Rabel defines being in tune. I love he called, this is his religious term for being in tune. Loving God.
Can't get simple.
Yeah, it can be that simple. It can be that. For him it was. I mean, he had practiced this probably, I've been in this 50 years, so he was probably here 40 years before that, I don't know. But anyway, we'll get into the simplicity here in a minute. The parable is Jesus' example of cause and effect. So once we get into that negative feeling, cause and effect comes in. Whereas if we were in a positive, finding a little bit of light in this, I'm not saying you've cured it or you're over it, but once we find a little bit of light in this, we get cause and effect in a positive sense. But once we allow ourselves to go into that negative set, we're going to get negative. That's the useless, unnecessary suffering part. Okay. But you can change it. We'll get into some helpful hints. Jesus says, agree with thine adversary quickly to prevent negative cause and effect. Do instead something positive within yourself. Quickly, so positively, cause and effect will occur instead of negativity. Do you see how that's working? Why he says, and he says, do it quickly. And some of the things, how can I be agreeable in the face of having adversity? Okay, you all wondering that? How can I change myself? How can I stop that? It just seems natural. Well, the only reason it seems natural is because we've been doing it a long time. We're naturally not made for that. Babies don't always do that, Kids have fun. People can say bad things to them if they don't care. They just sort of brush them off a lot of the time, until they get older and know they're supposed to respond to it. Okay, how can I be agreeable in the face of having an adversary? What if the adversary is wrong and even dangerous? Maybe we could start with maybe not all things in adversarial situations are not all bad. That's letting a little light in. It may not be as bad as we think. Is that not letting a little bit of wiggle room from just being angry and shooting darts at the other person and thoughts or situation? Or believing there's something else possible? At least it's a start in the right direction. We can find that there always can be room for differences. But it is not necessary to become disagreeable over differences. But we all can agree that no disagreement is worth throwing ourselves out of sync with the universal good. Can we agree on that? We don't want to throw ourselves out of sync with the good in us, out of which we come. We're changing it. The whole universe pulsates with the rhythm and harmony of truth that God means it for good. Okay, say it. God means it for good. God means it for good. God means it for good. So when you feel yourself starting to get into that or find yourself there, make yourself say that in your mind or heart, or say it out loud. Words are powerful. God means it for good, and I've got to find out what that means for me. Okay? It's not the other person. It's you. Okay? It's not that you have to love God. The other person doesn't have to love God. You do. The results come for the person who loves God. Okay. When you bring the love of God into the picture, you understand and accept you will find yourself in adversarial situations throughout your life. Throughout my life. It's just part of growing up in spirit. The love of God changes things. When you know you're connected to your adversary, if it's a person in some way, or connected to a situation, it can be work together for good. You don't know how it's going to at that time usually. So you got to get yourself into agreement somewhere in this. You can be an agreeable person who has adversaries. Being agreeable in the face of adversaries is proof of one loving God. Adversaries are part of the universe, and so are we. We are all connected to the spiritual universe. And know that sometimes you are adversaries for someone else. Now, I'm moving on to one of the last things Jesus taught, because it on the Sermon on the Mount, it will help you with this issue. And you've heard this many times. Also, you can ask and it shall be given. Search and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, for everyone who searches finds, and for everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Is there anyone among you, if your child asks for bread, you will give him a stone? Or if the child asks for a fish, will you give him a snake? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to you, to those who ask him, especially in love? You know? You've got all kinds of possibilities that will come up for you when you believe that there is a different way of thinking and being in an adversarial situation. You can be agreeable. You can be agreeable to that adversary. That's why you say, agree with him quickly. In other words, find some bit of light. Like this too shall pass. This is one of my favorite ones. This too shall pass. Just something so I don't go into that negative, that I catch. I mean, I don't still do it, even after 50 years, but at least I know my way out and don't blame the other person for my problem. Okay. Simplicity and clarity is why Ed Rabel, he calls this teaching one of the more advanced teachings that Jesus ever gave, because you have to simplify things. Ask, and it will be given. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it will be open to you. It's simple. We complicate things. We want to argue why we can't or why this won't work. But when you love God and you know these rules of the universe, you can't miss. You just got to stick to them and not give them up. So he says that to him this was one of the advanced teachings. Under spiritual law, true advancement is an advancement into greater simplicity and clarity. Things become more clear, and we don't know why. It's easier to do or easier to think the more you work with the spiritual laws. He thinks it's like mathematics. You start at the beginning with 1, and everything's in order, and nothing can change the order, and you come to the answer at the end, and it goes back to the 1. He said it's not rigid, it's a law that works as reliable as mathematics. That's what spiritual laws are to Ed Rabel. And I loved that concept. I can't mess it up if I follow the guidelines, so much. But I do anyway, sometimes mess it up because I don't follow it always. Or it gets a hold of me before but then I remember, keep remembering. And things will pop in when you ask for help. Ask, seek, knock. It'll take you out of that and put you into what can I do now that's possible, can fix it. Okay, where am I? He gives some examples of how to simplify your problems. And he says, if you're praying for healing, instead of going over symptoms, only ask for healing. Never tell God what is wrong with your life. Ask God for whatever is right and best. Make it easy. Never complain to God about the faults of another person. Only ask God to illuminate and bless that person. Never again complain or ask God why he has let you get into an emotional state. Instead, only ask God for his help in letting go of all your unnecessary emotions. Get you back on the line and say, thank you, Father, Mother God. So when an adversary or adverse condition arises in your life, take control, remembering all things work together for good. As you advance in spiritual understanding, you will see more simplicity and clarity in your spiritual life. Again, ask, seek, knock. There is only one presence and one power, God the good, omnipotent. Loving God, you can do it. We can do it. Loving God, we can do this and learn this. Thank you.